Welcome in, everybody, to week number 6 in Northeast Indiana high school football. My name is Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports. And as always, we have Casey O'Boyle with Northeast Indiana Game Night. And this week on the cover of Game Night, it's beastly, some of the biggest O-linemen in the area. And Casey, we're going to start off with one of your featured games. It is going to be South Adams at Adams Central, which should determine the ACAC.
Yeah, it's usually it's the game of the week. I mean, Woodland had a few good teams here recently that disrupted it, but not only the game of the week, game of the year, excuse me. South Adams, the Starfires, of course, under Grant Mosher have done great things the last few years. Of course, state runner-up finish with that great senior class last year. And Michael Mosher, no relation, different spelling. Coach Mosher out at Adams Central. He's been there quite a few years and really has built quite a program on the heels of Coach Minnick. This is another great matchup between, ACAC rivals. I think it's going to be a game that Adams Central should win. Just a superior offensive line, really good running backs. The quarterback, Ryan Black, has done really good things. And I think this is an uphill climb for South Adams because they've been just decimated by injuries. They've got 4 senior two-way starters that are out for this game. And when you have, that many, that's 8 starting spots out. I mean, there's not many teams in the area that can say that. Last week, they were thumped pretty bad by Monroe Central. But that score is a little misleading from the standpoint that they had a nice drive to start the game, ended up, I think, getting down around the 10-yard line, Jeff, and gave up a pick 6. The sophomore quarterback, Owen Warner, Coach Mosher said that was the first time he's looked like a sophomore all year since he took over for Aiden Warner. 3 interceptions, and of course they got blanked. First time they've been blanked in in about 6 years since Woodland. I think 61 straight games. So they've got a lot to prove to the Starfires, but by the same token, Adams Central is a really, really good team, loaded, I think, on both sides of the ball. Talking to Grant Mosher at South Adams this past week, he really thinks Adams Central is the team to beat in Class 1A. And I don't disagree with him. You've got Alex Curry back, Nick Neuenschwander, Blake Hirely, Corbin Hershey is a really good offensive lineman, along with Brian Gerard at center. All those guys are seniors. The junior, Ryan Black, I mentioned him already, is really an efficient quarterback, doing a nice job leading that offense. They do throw it a little bit more than some of the area's run-dominated teams. And then a lot of these guys playing both sides of the ball too. But they've got, a lot of tradition. And, last week against Heritage, 49-0 at halftime. They just put the game away quickly. This is, again, a team that's really, really good. And I think Adams Central finds a way to win this and with relative ease.
Yeah, Casey, like you said, South Adams coming off a 23-0 loss against Monroe Central. And Adams Central, their first loss came in week number 2, 21-19 against Eastside, in a game that really could have went either way.
Yeah, that's been a really fun recent rivalry, early season, pre-conference season rivalry between Adams Central and Eastside. Both 2 programs having a lot of success in recent years. Coach Mason's boys got the best of them, did they, in week 2? And I think Adams Central and Eastside will both have nice tournament runs as well.
Casey, the next game we want to look at is East Noble traveling to take on Norwell. Norwell's only loss on the season so far was 41-7 against Leo, and that was at Norwell. In this game here, East Noble, a very tough opponent, nearly pulled off a shocking victory against Leo at home last week.
Yeah, what a comeback by the Knights, 32-12. Leo was ahead, and that touchdown late in the second quarter really proved to be the difference in the game. If they don't get that, I think East Noble, with all that momentum, finds a way to win in the second half. There's a nice picture there in Game Night of the sideline there at East Noble. Brendan Bowen, one of our photographers who does a great job, sent us that. And then a cutout, of course, of Luke Amstutz on the sideline. He's done a tremendous job at East Noble. This is a team, remember, that lost last year to Leo, and then of course came back and beat them in the playoffs. I wouldn't rule that out again. He's really does a great job, I think, does Coach Amstutz and his staff with adjustments, obviously halftime adjustments, but also second time around adjustments. They're really hard to beat a second time. And Leo knows that. Coach Souter, they're going to have to be prepared for some different things if they get a rematch in the postseason, which I think they probably will. I was out there earlier this week and brought some B. Antonio's pizza to the guys out at Leo for our team of the week, and they're still very, very focused on what they want to do. So, but getting back to East Noble at Norwell, last year, you'll recall, Norwell won this game 21-17. I think really surprised a lot of people. They had a nice 35-18 win last week over New Haven, posting a shutout in the second half, which was critical because at the time, New Haven looked like they might have been the better team. So that score was a little misleading. But Norwell, again, snuck up on people last year, I think, a little bit, and got a second place finish in the Northeast 8. They're not going to surprise East Noble this year. I think East Noble's just still got too many playmakers. Kanan Carrico, who we featured last week on the cover of GameNight, had a monster game, over 200 rushing yards last week against Leo. I think as that young quarterback, Xander Brazel, gets a little bit more comfortable, he's got the weapons with Rowan Zolman and Nick Munson, Ethan Nichols. I mean, they've got some playmakers for sure. We don't talk about them quite as much as we do the fellas here in Fort Wayne, but East Noble's definitely got some playmakers. I think that defensive line is vastly underrated. I really think East Noble wins this game tonight by at least a couple scores over Norwell. But again, the Norwell Knights did it last year, so I wouldn't rule them out.
Casey, next, Northrop is traveling to take on Lures. This Lures squad is just rolling with a huge victory last week at Northside. Northrop showed a little new wrinkle, putting Jelante Hinton in the backfield with Michael Neighbors. They had a lot of success, and I gotta say, I don't want to say I was surprised by their win, but I was surprised the way they kind of handled Concordia last week.
Yeah, because Concordia looked like they were starting to turn the corner a little bit. They've been kind of stuck on 2 touchdowns for 4 weeks in a row, have the Cadets, but Northrop's got some nice parts. I think Coach John Zolnick does a really good job with their defense. I think that's one side of the ball, Jeff, that's really improved under his direction the last couple of years. We've been waiting for this team to put all the pieces together, whether it's offense and defense and then special teams, or whether it's a running game and a passing game. Well, it's starting to feel like they're really close, like they're knocking on the door of something special. And Michael Neighbors, there's a good shot of him there in tonight's issue of GameNight. He's starting to become that guy. Jason Dorfler said he's kind of taken that mantle. Jelante Hinton had some carries about this time last year and did some good things running the ball for Northrop. The sophomore, a great athlete. I thought maybe we'd see him more in a tight end position or maybe even an offensive line position, but they're like, no, we're going to feed you the ball, big fella. He's that good of an athlete, doing a really good job. But again, on the other side of the ball, that defense is really where I think they've made a lot of noise this year, improved tremendously. The end, Stanford Petway, and then Hinton is the other one. Damon Bainey, a two-way starter, is kind of that nose guard, really tough, strong kid in the middle. The linebackers, Avant Rogers, Adam Walberry last week had some nice tackles. Jermaine Parker, Tavon Freeman, all doing a really, really good job. We've known a lot about their secondary, and that's the big question mark, of course, for tonight. This high-powered Bishop Luers offense with Carson Clark, Brody Glenn, of course, Sir Hale running the ball in between the tackles. This will be the stiffest test and challenge, of course, for Northrop to date. So how do they match up against this team? I don't know. I still think Luers is the cream of the crop in the SAC. There's a good shot at their page this week. Nelson Kanapke in that offensive line. I think we're going to see some new guys, not necessarily new guys, but more guys shuffling around there. Coach Lindsay said he'd like to develop a little bit more depth. I think he's looking big picture through the Class 2A state playoffs, not overlooking the Bruins by any means, but just understanding that to get where they want to go, they need to be firing on all cylinders. And if there's any question marks, it's in the depth department for Bishop Luers. So I think we'll see some new guys there, but otherwise they're healthy and ready to roll. And while I do think Northrop's improved tremendously, I still think Bishop Luers are 3 or 4 scores better.
Go back to Carson Clark real quick. I have him as the #1 QB rating in the state. I know not every school is on max preps, but there's a ton. And when you look at quarterbacks with more than 80 attempts, his 132.3 comes up on top. Just speak to the kind of season and career he's putting together at Luers. And also, it seems like Luers has a knack for producing great quarterbacks.
Yeah, they do. Coach Stansky, again, we've talked about, does a great job developing quarterbacks. Carson Clark, if you look at where he was at as a sophomore to where he is now, what maturity, what development, he's really improved a ton. He's 479 yards shy of becoming the all-time passing leader at Bishop Luers, which is pretty impressive, which tells me he's probably going to get it here in the next couple of weeks. But again, you got to give a lot of credit to that coaching staff, specifically Coach Stansky. But I remember meeting Carson a couple of years ago around, I think it was Halloween night. He was sitting in my living room. I don't know if he was putting the moves on my daughter or what was going on there, but he was no, I'm just kidding. He was not putting the moves on her. He was sitting, being respectful. But that's the first time I met the young man. I knew who he was. He was just coming off the tail end of his sophomore season. And the Knights just weren't playing Bishop Luers football. Let's face it, 2 years ago, that the program was a little bit in disarray, but they were playing a lot of young guys. And I think deep down inside, we all felt like, okay, when they get all their pieces together and these kids grow into young men, they're going to be pretty good. Now, did I think he would become the quarterback that he is today? Honestly, I didn't know, because when you're a sophomore, you make sophomore mistakes. But since then, I think we saw it with that playoff run last year. His development, his maturity. I think he throws the best ball in the area. You asked me week 1, Jeff, who do I think would be the preseason player of the year, trying to forecast 12, 15 weeks down the road. And I told you at the time, I think the winner of that Bishop Luers Carroll game, the quarterback of that winning team, would probably be the front runner for player of the year. And I'll stand by that right now. There is a fellow up at Eastside that's putting up some pretty nice numbers as well. Laban Davis, the quarterback there. But right now, for my money, I think Carson Clark's got to be the guy. Again, you pointed out the QBR, 16 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, tremendous numbers, a lot of poise. We know he can take a hit. We saw the hit he took against Homestead, Evan Pearson off the edge. Tough kid, really improved, and really happy for Carson Clark and the Knights.
Well, Casey, Wayne is traveling to Snyder. Now, this game is going to feature the top 2 running backs in the SAC, and I really like the job that Coach Sherwood Haydock is doing over at Wayne. They feel like they're a team that's been in every single game, even though they only got 1 win on the season. That came last week against Southside, Wayne winning at 36-26. But these guys are battling, and when it comes to Sean Collins and Lamarian Nelson, pretty exciting backfield.
Definitely, and we shouldn't be really surprised. This is kind of the MO for Coach Sherwood Haydock. He'll play and coach to his personnel. He told us at the beginning of the year, Lamarian Nelson's going to have a big year, and sure enough, he is. He's doing a really nice job holding on to the ball, not turning it over. 6 touchdowns on the season, 166 yards per game. Pretty nice numbers. A huge week last week, over 200 yards against the Archers in a game that I thought they'd win by 2 scores, and sure enough, they won 36-26. I like what he's doing. I feel like that passing game's got to come along for them to really knock off another top flight opponent. Right now they're packing everything in, double tight, almost like Leo does to a certain degree. And Aiden Meek, the senior quarterback, I think needs some more completions early in the game to get his confidence going. But he's got those two tight ends, Nehemiah Young and Gabe Rhodes, both big, capable guys that have good hands. They're doing a great job right now in run blocking, but they need somebody else to complement Sean Collins in the passing game. And I think it's got to be maybe one of those tight ends. So we'll see if they try to throw to those guys a little bit more tonight against Snyder, a Snyder program that is known for throwing to their tight ends. I mean, if there's a program in the area that's utilized that position more in the last 10 or 15 years, I don't know who it is, because the Panthers are really, really strong in that regard. This year they've got Carter Wortman and Lincoln Ferks, two capable guys at tight end. And I expect Snyder, to build off the momentum that they've got going on right now. Huge win last week over Homestead. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead. Homestead cut it in half, and then that lengthy field goal by Nick Talamentes. Here's a kid that I think, based on that kick and the one against Northside, needs to be in some strong consideration for special teams player of the year for game night, but also for all conference consideration. Those are money kicks and proved to be the game-winning points and two big wins for Snyder. So we'll see. Snyder, just when you thought it was time to, write their eulogy, they just seem to find a way to come back. I think they've got some good continuity. The defense is playing really well. They've made some adjustments there, Jeff, that you talked about earlier before we taped. And then, of course, that ground game is really starting to surge with Tyrese Brown. As long as they stay healthy and they keep moving forward, I think everybody's saying Lures is going to win the city. That's exactly the way Snyder wants it. They got to take it one step at a time and see if week 9 they can rise up and take care of the Knights. Now, whether or not their one game that they lost against Southside would factor in, I haven't delved into that. That's something here in the next few weeks we'll look into a little closer. But first things first, they got to win the next one in front of them, and that next one is Wayne tonight.
Yeah, I did see where if it came down to that and Snyder ended up beating Lures, that Snyder would get a 2-0 win for that South Side. But we'll still have to see how that plays out. Once again, Lamarian Nelson, 830 yards on the season. So this is the first week that he owns the SAC rushing crown. Coming into today's game, Tyrese Brown was 779 yards rushing. Casey, I got to believe he would have ran for 150 to 200 against Southside. Probably would have been taken out midway through the third quarter. Speaking of those changes, Kedrell Billingsley looked like he was playing pretty good football last week against that Homestead passing attack, most notably Nate Anderson. And going to Wayne's defense, you got a bunch of guys playing both ways. Aiden Meek is their starting cornerback. He's got 17 tackles on the season, 2 interceptions. And going back to Nehemiah Young, he does a pretty dang good job inside linebacker. He's 6'3", 260 pounds, 29 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss. And Avant Rogers leads the team with 40 tackles. So this is going to be a fun game, I think, to watch. What do you think the final on this one will be?
Well, I think it's close for a while. I think attrition will eventually take its toll. I think also Snyder's really starting to click on all cylinders. I think from a confidence standpoint, they've got to feel really good about what they did last week in that big win against Homestead. So I think they're probably, at least 3 touchdown favorite in this game. And again, I think it'll be more attrition in the second half that will take its toll against the Generals. You talked about some of those two-way starters. Sean Collins, don't forget him, also playing both sides of the ball. 2 or 3 of these linemen getting a lot of reps on both sides of the ball. That, I think, will take its toll. Whereas Snyder, for the most part, their guys are one-way guys. I feel like they've got all their bullets in their holster, so to speak, and they're really, really playing good football right now. You mentioned Avant Rogers, the senior outside linebacker. Every week, it seems like on Summit City Sports, I see him flying to the ball, making a tackle for loss or a big hit. I mean, he's this kind of kid that's really, really come into his own in his senior year. They've had a few guys because of injury and some disciplinary issues that are no longer playing right now for the Generals, and they've had to rely on some of these guys, especially in a two-way capacity. So hats off to Avant Rogers, doing a really nice job. I think another guy that probably deserves some all-conference consideration. And then on the other side, Snyder, Again, we know they can run the ball. Can they pass it consistently? Luke Halpert, I feel like each week gets a little bit better. He's always been very efficient, but he's cutting down on his turnovers, doing a really nice job kind of managing the offense. And I think we'll see more of that in this game, where they throw the ball maybe a little bit more on first down with some play action opportunities. See if they can't pad those numbers a little bit for Luke, get some of those receivers involved, including Kamari Juarez and those tight ends. And I do look for Snyder to win this game by 2 or 3 scores.
Casey, looking at that Snyder game last week, you really thought that they were going to end up really taking it to Homestead. In the third quarter, Hopper was able to find Juarez deep, put him in scoring position, but then penalties pushed them back. They ended up missing a field goal attempt. That one was attempted by Brian Peterson and not Talamantes. But I'd have to agree with you. It seems like Hopper to Juarez down the field is open most of the time. They nearly had a completion in the Carroll game early on. That was a deep ball on the sideline that I believe it ended up just being an incomplete pass, but it was on the money and really close to being completed.
Yeah, that's I think we thought going into the year that those two guys were going to be their big playmakers in the passing game. And they obviously have a nice connection together. Can they get a few more in this game against Wayne? We'll find out. But the parts are there, and now they got to put it all together. They can't just be a run only team. So I think they want to keep mixing in some play action passes, keep utilizing their tight ends. They run a lot of that pistol stuff still, where they can do a simple play action, have a running back there to help with max protect, and then throw the ball down the field. So I think Snyder's in a good position right now, and they're kind of flying under the radar. Whoever thought we'd be saying that about Snyder football, but that's where they're at right now. And I think that's a place where Kurt Tippmann likes to be.
Backup running back Langston Level has been awesome. Casey, Bishop Dwenger has lost 2 straight games, and a lot of people are kind of freaking out about it there in Saints Nation. It's one of those things where you're kind of penalized for your own success if you're head coach Jason Garrett, who's just started off his career winning a state championship as a head coach for the Saints. So hard to top that one. But Bishop Dwenger, they lose to Homestead 37-21. They really got drubbed by Carroll 42-23. This week, they're traveling to their old home, Zollner Stadium, to take on a Concordia team that's really had a tough go of it as of late, losing 27-14 to Northrop. I thought that game would be a little bit more evenly matched, but having gone through the gauntlet of Homestead, Snyder, and Lures, seems like that's really taking its toll on the cadets.
Yeah, this is another program that I felt would be in rebuilding mode going into the season. New coach Mike Eschbach taking over for Tim Manigal, who had a lot of success with the cadets. They graduated a ton. And so I don't think there were any surprises that they're where they're at 1-4. If you would ask me through 5 weeks, what would their record be? I would have told you 1-4. And I think most people that follow high school football in these parts would have said the same thing. Nice win against Southside in week 1. And as it turns out, that was a really impressive win to beat them by 3 scores. But you look at that, you mentioned the gauntlet, Homestead, Snyder, Lures. Those are really difficult opponents, especially for a 3A program that's kind of in rebuilding mode. They've had some quarantine issues. They've had some guys missing. The quarterback, there's a shot of him, Eli Maddox, the junior. He's missed some time. Big Bubba Craig, who's one of our beasts in the center spread this week, 6'8", 400-pound monster. He had to miss some time. So they have not been at full strength, and they've got a lot of guys that are playing both ways, especially in the skill positions. James Rusher, the junior, is a really talented player. So this is a team that right now is still trying to find themselves with a new coach. But that being said, they have done some decent things. Don't forget, a few weeks ago against Snyder, Jeff, that game was pretty close for a while between the Cadets and the Snyder Panthers. So we know they can play. We know they've got some playmakers like Dontrell Johnson. They've really, kind of pigeonholed him in the backfield as their main running back. Jace Parnan, we've talked a lot about him. Remember, Jace Parnan played at St. Charles, Jeff, and he was there actually when I was an assistant coach under Sam Tallarico. And And Jace is a really good football player. I'll be honest with you. If he was at Bishop Dwenger right now, he may be their starting quarterback as a senior. But he shared reps with Evan Springer as an 8th grader. He's just a kind of a utility guy. I would not be surprised if Coach Eschbach had a trick or two up his sleeve for this game against the Saints for Parnan against his old buddies from St. Charles. Now, I don't know. I haven't been to any practices. That's just me surmising, knowing how some of these coaches think and also knowing how you can motivate certain kids in certain situations. This is a kid that definitely wants to show out in this game against Bishop Dwenger, and Bishop Dwenger is kind of at a pivotal point in their season. You know, they're at a fork in the road. What are we going to get from the Saints in this contest? Are they going to respond with a rousing effort, or are they going to keep tumbling the other direction? And you mentioned it. You know, the natives are getting restless. You know, fans at Bishop Dwenger, just like at Lures, just like at Snyder and some of the other top flight programs, they're accustomed to winning. And when things don't go right, you start to hear rumbles and people get a little worked up. I remember, you know, Snyder a few years back with Coach Kurt Tittman, people were calling for his head. And I'm like, folks, take a deep breath. He knows what he's doing. He's got a proven track record, and see where things go. I would say the same thing with Dwenger's staff. They know what they're doing. They need to rally the troops, circle the wagons, get back in the film room, and approach things in a way that makes sense for Bishop Dwenger football. What that means to me, I think we'll see a lot of running on the ground. I think old school traditional football, power football, you know, I formation, full house backfield type stuff, and see if they can't impose their will on the Concordia Cadets tonight. That would be my prediction. But again, they may come out empty backfield 4 wide and just throw it all around. You never know.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've been keeping an eye on all year. Evan Springer, the starting quarterback, Bodie Dickerson coming in. Dickerson, 9 of 13, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. Do you feel like he gives the Saints offense a better chance right now? Or have you really been able to keep an eye out on those two?
Well, it's hard to say. You know, some of those numbers are against, you know, either against backups. In many cases, they were against Carroll, or in situations where let's face it, the pressure isn't as intense as it is early in the game. Carroll jumped out to a 35-7 lead last week, Jeff, as you know, and really put that game away and called off the Dogs after the break. So I hate to answer that, because by doing so, I feel like it disparages one kid or unfairly promotes another kid. I think at this point, the Saints have bigger issues than just the quarterback position. I think they don't quite know what their identity is, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And let's not forget, the defense gave up some big chunk plays last week too. So this isn't just on one side of the ball or one position or one coach or anything like that. This is a team that right now, based on these last 2 weeks, have had some difficulties. And I think it's in all 3 facets, as Coach Garrett would say, all 3 facets. If they're not really playing Bishop Dwenger football in all 3 facets, they're underachieving. And I think Coach Garrett would say that. And I think they just need to get back to the basics, whatever that may mean. And to me, Bishop Dwenger is run first, control the line of scrimmage, pound the ball. I think this line, there's a good picture of them on game night this week, is not as dominant as they've had in Coach Garrett's tenure. I mean, let's face it. Think about some of the guys he's had, right? Joe Tittman, now starting up at Wisconsin. You know, this is a guy that's probably going to play in the NFL. You've got Luke Wigington, who's down at Indiana University. You've got Vinny Feecable, who I think might be the best of the bunch, who's also down at Indiana University. You've got Sam Henry. You've got, I mean, you name it. They've got 3 or 4 other beasts that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but there's 3 D1 guys that I just threw at you. How many programs can boast that in the last 3 or 4 seasons? Not many in the entire state. So when you don't have those guys, or don't have one of those guys to be an anchor, it does affect things a little bit. But I do think that this starting offensive line has, in my opinion, has done better than I thought they might. Now, whether that goes back to play calling, personnel, overall scheme, I don't know. But they're still scoring points, 23 points, 21 points against Homestead. You know, they're giving up a lot of points. There's some things going on there that the Saints are going to have to figure out. And at some point, maybe you just tip your hat to the opponent and say, hey, they lost to two pretty good 6A teams in Homestead and Carroll, right? So we'll see. To your original point, people out at Dwinger expect the best. They expect state championships, just like they do at Lures, just like they do at Snyder and some of the other elite programs. I think these coaches will circle the wagons. They'll get things going, and I expect Bishop Dwinger to win this game.
Casey, I had a chance to watch that Wisconsin-Penn State game earlier in their year, and Joe Tittman is such a leader, not only on the offensive line, but on the offense. He's so vocal, just getting all the guys pumped up and making sure everybody's on the same page. Really cool to see.
Yeah, I like Joe's game. I really liked him when he was at Bishop Dwinger, really engaging fella. And you're right. I mean, he's, you know, as a center should, when he breaks the huddle, I mean, he's calling stuff out even before he gets down into his crouch. And he's done a great job. He's got a big one this weekend at Soldier Field against the Irish of Notre Dame. So we'll see how that goes. But I actually have the Steve and Brendan Bowen taking pictures at Purdue when Wisconsin comes to visit in a few weeks. So we'll have some of those to share with the Game Night Nation.
Well, Casey, Northside is going to host Homestead. Homestead coming off the loss, and Northside just really hasn't looked the same since that week one, just instant classic against Snyder.
No, they haven't. I mean, they got the win a couple weeks ago at Wayne, 21-14. But besides that, I mean, again, you talk gauntlet. Does anybody have a tougher schedule? Snyder, Dwinger, Carroll, Lures, Homestead. 5 of the first 6 weeks, they have the best teams in the conference. The last 3 weeks, Southside, Northrop, Concordia. That's when I think Jeff will really find out, okay, is Northside about what we thought they were? Do they pick up 2 or 3 wins down the tail stretch? I think they probably do, because I still think this is a roster that is stacked with talent. They, like a lot of the programs in the area, have just been plagued by quarantine issues. I mean, in some of these quarantine situations, guys are missing 3 games, 4 games. I mean, Rodney Woods is supposed to be out again for this contest this week against Homestead. You've got Bronte Johnson, who's missed time, Jordan Turner, of course, the starting quarterback, Brayshawn Bassett, who's also their starting defensive end. He's been out with an injury. So Coach Ben Johnson, first-year coach, still kind of getting his sea legs a little bit in the SAC as a head mentor. I think they're going to do just fine down the stretch run, but right now they are kind of limping into this game. But Homestead, you know, coming off a 17-14 win or loss rather to Snyder, the Spartans are going to be really hungry to get back in the win column. Peyton Slavin, I think, has really matured and come a long way as the starting quarterback for Homestead, the junior. Really impressed with his ability to run the ball. And then, of course, Nate Anderson, you're highlighting him there. I think I've said it all along. I think he might be the best overall receiver in the area, and there's a lot of really good ones. Brody Glenn out at Lures, Rocco Sioka at Bishop Dwinger, and many others. Gage Sparrow out at Homestead is another one, a guy that doesn't get a lot of credit, but is a really good wide receiver for the Spartans. So we'll see. I think Homestead should win this game fairly easily. Last year, Northside actually was up 14-7. Bronte Johnson, as a freshman, took back a kickoff, and they had all that momentum. They had Deuce Taylor, and at that point in the season, really no one had figured out how to slow Deuce. I mean, the Deuce was loose literally the second he walked onto the field. And Homestead did a pretty good job last year keeping him around 200 yards and eventually pulled away late in that contest. But Northside had an early lead, and for folks, it sure looked like there could be an upset brewing.
Casey, with Northside, Donovan Williams has been the starting quarterback now for the last, I believe, 2 weeks. When Rashawn Bassett gets back, do you expect him to be the starting quarterback? Do you think that they will focus him on defense? Last year, as a sophomore defensive end, he was extremely disruptive. I was just so pleased to see what he was able to do from the defensive end position. But are you hearing anything on that front?
No, I think it's gonna be a wait and see decision. I think they'll probably, we'll know more these next couple of weeks. How does the young sophomore Donovan Williams perform? I mean, is he, he's done some nice things too. I mean, I thought he had some good passes in that first week game against Snyder, when Brayshawn went out, Donovan came in, did some nice things. 6'1", 205 pounds. So he's a big, strong sophomore, very capable. If he performs well, I think in these next two outings, then they might say, okay, Brayshawn, we're going to let the young fella be our guy. You focus on the defensive side of the ball, and then they'll feel really good about the prospect of, another injury, having a guy that can step in and just, take the reins and run with it. Whereas in that Bishop Dwenger game where they had, guys missing because of quarantine, Jordan Turner got dinged up on a big hit by Adam Lee from Bishop Dwenger. He left the game. And of course, Rodney Woods ended up having to be their emergency quarterback. And so, because Donovan wasn't available in that game. So I think they'll be in a good spot there, whoever it is, knowing that they've got two really good, capable athletes at the quarterback position. And again, that second half of their conference season, I think we're going to know if they drop those three games and they finish 1-8, we'll be like, okay, this team maybe was a bit overrated to start the season. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they win 2 or 3 of those games down the stretch. I think they play with Homestead, for a while in this contest this week. And I think Northside's going to be just fine and be a pretty dangerous team in the postseason if they're healthy.
Casey, let's wrap up the SAC real quick. Carroll is traveling to Southside. I said it after week 2, actually after week 3, after Carroll went into Northside and handed them that loss. I felt like Carroll is one of the most complete teams in the SAC. I wouldn't be surprised if they run the table. Looking at the rest of their schedule, they got Homestead at home, then Concordia and Wayne. So it's looking pretty good for the Chargers, to where they could, if Snyder beat Lures, there could be a 3-way tie for first place, with each team kind of beating each other, if you will. Carroll beats Snyder, Lures beats Carroll, Snyder beats Lures. Of course, that still has to happen in week number 9. But what do you think about the Chargers right now? Like you said, up 35-7 at the half at Bishop Dwenger last week.
Yeah, this is a team right now that's playing really well. They're not that electrifying aerial show that they were a year ago, even though a lot of the parts are returning, but they are running the ball a little bit more consistently. I think offensive coordinator Andy Papagiannis has done a nice job kind of adapting his thought processes a little bit with that offense and realizing, okay, maybe having, Jeff Becker throw for 350, 400 yards every week isn't necessarily the recipe for long-term success. So they've definitely made more of a concerted effort to run the ball. Luke Carmody has kind of been that main guy, but also Jeff Becker. In the past, he'd get a lot of his rushing yards off of scrambles, off of design pass plays where the pocket would collapse and he would just take off and run it. He certainly can do that. But I think they're getting creative and finding ways to get him involved in the running game with true run design. And I think that's an important part of this offense going forward. We knew the defense was going to be good, and they have been. I think that secondary is vastly underrated. I think Tucker Steele, outside linebacker, the senior, is a really, really good football player, having an all-conference type season. We've talked about Jackway and Ottenweller at the end, just wreaking havoc. So they, too, have a lot of the parts, as a 6A program should, and they're pretty healthy. And we know they've got a backup quarterback in Owen Shealy. We saw what he could do a few weeks back. So to your point, this is a dangerous team. Wouldn't be surprised if they're 8-1, and Homestead would be the one tough matchup down the stretch next week. But other than that, they get by the Spartans. I think they're going to be primed to maybe share that conference title. I mean, as we know, there can't be any two-way title sharers in the SAC because it's a perfect round robin schedule for all 10 opponents. So because of that, you can have a 3-way. And I think the 3-way conference share would be a pretty cool scenario, considering that that opener between Bishop Lures and Carroll ended in such devastating fashion for the Chargers with their new stadium upgrades and everything. To kind of have that pulled out from underneath them, to see them rebound, kind of reminds me of Homestead last year, losing their first game of the season to the Northrop Bruins and then running the table. Be really cool for the Carroll folks to have that opportunity, or at least put themselves in the position to have that opportunity And then of course there'll be big Snyder fans in week 9 against Bishop Luers, which is kind of ironic thinking about Coach Doug Dinan, wearing his old Snyder gear, secretly underneath his Carroll gear in week 9, pulling for the Snyder Panthers to beat Bishop Luers. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but if he got any in the closet, he may want to.
Somehow I doubt it. Yeah, and then looking at Southside, what a game by Lorenz Taverin, their backup quarterback. They had a hard time running the ball against Wayne, but passing for 169 yards. Once again, we talk about Wayne, a one-win team playing hard for their head coach. You can say the exact same thing about Southside.
Yeah, they're doing the best that they can. Again, they've been shorthanded this year because of injuries, because of quarantine. It's kind of a recurring theme, it seems like, especially for the Fort Wayne Community Schools teams. A lot of those programs have just been besieged by quarantines, and it's really hard to get any continuity from week to week because you're missing practices. You got key guys missing games and practices, and then they come back and you're shuffling people around. And it's a bit of a nightmare right now for some of these coaches, especially at a program like Southside that's not real deep to begin with. So hopefully they get healthy and they get things settled here for the stretch run. They did at least get that one win earlier in the season, so that's good for Southside. Now they just want to focus on fundamental improvement, just get better, stay focused, stay together, see if they can't, maybe scratch out another win down the stretch.
Well, Casey, the last game we want to look at here is Columbia City at New Haven. Obviously, with Columbia City, they have Gregory Bolt, good-looking quarterback who's kind of helped resurgence of this program. And with New Haven, they're just kind of looking to catch a break and putting together a full 4 quarters in a game.
Yeah. If I was Coach Kyle Boer out at New Haven, I would spend an entire practice, maybe 2, just catching balls. I mean, they've had so many drops this year. You've talked about it. We've written about it. They've got to help their quarterback out. I mean, Jakar Williams has done a really, really nice job. He's only completing 39% of his passes. Well, we know he's better than that. He's put the ball on the numbers many, many times where it hasn't been caught by those New Haven receivers. And here's the thing, Jeff, they're very capable. The problem is some of these guys are so fast and they're thinking 6 every time the ball's coming their way. They're not catching the ball first, which is the most important thing, of course. I would be spending a lot of time on that in practice. I'm sure they are. And if they catch some of those balls, a couple of these games, maybe it's a different final score. Now, they don't beat Leo. I'm not suggesting that, but they might hang around a little bit there. And then certainly Norwell game, same thing. There's a few plays. If they hang on to the ball, I think they might find a way to upset the Norwell Knights. They were leading that game 18-14, remember? So I like this team still. I think in terms of this matchup, you talk about must-see TV. You've got Greg Bolt. You've got Jakar Williams. I mean, both those guys are men. At our photo shoots, Jeff, seeing both those guys up close and personal, they are solid dudes. And they don't look like quarterbacks. I mean, these are guys that look like they've been carved out of a block of granite, and they should be playing middle linebacker or tight end. And they are dudes. And I like both of them. I like both of them to play at the next level. And for my money, that's the matchup I want to watch, is those two guys head to head. I think that's going to be a fantastic, compelling story. Columbia City really starting to click on all cylinders. You've got Sievers, the running back, having a nice season. You've got Hunter Heron in the passing game is kind of their home run threat. Abe Barrera, the senior, is a nice complementary running back. And then, of course, the young freshman, Stratton Fuller. Peyton Shearer, a 6'5" tight end / wide receiver. So Greg Bolt's got some parts there. His numbers are pretty quiet, about 100 yards per game in passing, but they haven't had to, Jeff. Last week, 475 rushing yards, broke a school record for rushing yards in a single game. It's the second time this year that they've done that. Think of that. And so when you look at Greg Bolt's pedestrian numbers, they're not so pedestrian. If you're rushing for over 400 yards and you got a quarterback that's still getting 100 yards a game, that to me sounds like a pretty dangerous offense. And if the defense can hold its own, this could be a dangerous team down the stretch. Every year it seems like Coach Brett Fox's Eagles get out of the gate strong because their back half of the schedule is so much tougher than the front half. So they always start out, it seems like 4-0, 5-0, 5-1, whatever the case may be. They've got the one loss this year at against Delta in week 2, 14-10. Other than that, pretty impressive wins. And a lot of these wins, the game's been over in the first half. So this is, I think, really their first true test since week 2. New Haven on the road. I think New Haven's much better than their 1-4 record would suggest. So I think this is a very, very competitive game. I still think Columbia City wins it, but I do believe it's a 4-quarter game.
Yeah, impressive rushing numbers, like you said, averaging 6.5 a carry, 18 touchdowns, 1,549 rushing yards on the season. For New Haven, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I just want to once again go to this sectional number 20. Casey, it's always such an exciting sectional because Wayne and Southside end up finding a way to get wins like Southside did last year against New Haven. So once again, I think that New Haven could be a tough out in this sectional this year.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a very compelling sectional, and you've got teams like Marion and Delta there as well that add a lot of intrigue, a lot of tradition at both those programs. It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, Southside, remember a few years ago, ended up upsetting Leo in it was sectional 19 or 20. I forget which one since they moved people around, but no one saw that coming. And so, yes, definitely. To your point, Wayne and Southside, how cool would it be to see them on either side of the bracket? Two teams maybe limping into this thing with one win each, perhaps, and find a way to get a couple W's and play each other for a championship. Is it going to happen? Probably not, but it's very, very possible. That'd be a pretty cool scenario.
Well, Casey, just real quick, tell me about the beast here, your center spread. You got to love this issue.
Oh, I do. I mean, this is, I don't do it every year, but this is, the Swami loves large, hunky men. I think he harkens back to his CYO days where he was a large, hunky man with an X on the back of his helmet. I love this. This is the fun stuff that we do in game night where it's a little bit tongue in cheek. It's just, we're having a lot of fun. You can see some of the pictures at our photo shoot. The kids are having a great time. And these were 10 guys that I thought kind of stood out physically in terms of stature. I mean, look at Chris Hood there. I mean, what is he doing to that poor kid in the bottom left there from Leo? I mean, that's assault right there. Yeah. I mean, I think he probably might've gotten arrested after that play. I mean, but 6'9", what a monster he is. All the way to the right, then you've got Bubba Craig, 6'8". I mean, he's massive. Look at him. He's got his hand on that coach. That looks like his little brother, his coach. I mean, how great is that? You got the two big beasts in the middle, DJ Moore and Johnny Waddell. Johnny Waddell is, I mean, they list him at what's that say, 387? He's got to be 4.5 bills. I mean, he's enormous. What a giant human. And then, of course, the guys on the top, I really liked all those kids at our photo shoot. Really fun-loving guys. For my money, Landon, Livingston, and DJ Allen are my prototypical kind of beasts. Big guys, Landon's on his way to West Virginia, just a really large, thick human being. DJ Allen is every bit of 6'8". What a frightening athlete he is. He's going to have a great career at Rutgers. Yep. And I think those two together on both lines is the reason New Haven or Leo is the team to beat in the Northeast 8 and maybe in Class 4A.
Geez, DJ is only 245 pounds, kind of a shrimp compared to the rest of these guys. Hey, no Jordan King on here, the sophomore from Northside. He's a big
just
man.
A sophomore. Well. Yep, just a sophomore. There's time.
And
Jordan, I think Jordan could put on another 20 pounds between now and next year to earn some Swami love.
And how crazy was it last week with that Leo offensive line to say Chris Hood will be the largest human being on the field tonight?
Yeah, and he really is. Chris makes a lot of these guys look small.
Oh, yeah.
He's an enormous young man. I mean, he's a big dude on his way to Ball State. He's got really good feet, too. Remember, he plays basketball, as does Landon Livingston. So these are guys that are multi-sport athletes in many cases. And so they're not just, tipping the scales. They're athletes. And Chris Hood is a real good football player. I really enjoyed covering him these last few years.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode and another great weekend of games. So my name is Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports. And as always, that was Casey O'Boyle, the Sideline Swami. Check him out on Twitter.
Thank you, Jeff.